cannabis culture from a woman's point of view. And as always, here to elevate the cannabis industry. I'm one of your hosts, Ice Dawson, Cannabis Socialite.
And I am Dasheeda Dawson, the WeedHead.
Hi, sis.
Hey, sis.
Hey, sis. On today's episode of She Blaze, the NBA relaxes THC testing. House of Representatives secretly greenlight cannabis research, and New Jersey lawmakers are confused about legalization.
Tell me about it. I can't wait to get into those hot topics. But of course, I'm going to kick things off with the high of the week. And my high of the week is Live Piff or Live Piff. It depends on where you at in New York and how you're talking about it. But Live Piff is an amazing CBD tea brand that I absolutely love. And I am excited, of course, to be sharing some details about it for you today. I've been living off this detox tea. Okay, this detox tea is the truth. Why? Because first of all, it's $10 for a 5 count. But second of all, it has ginger and turmeric, and it's been awesome for anti-inflammation, but also antiviral. And during COVID times, I've been living for this. Right now, I'm sipping on their green tea, and of course, I'm repping their camo tea. So this crew neck is everything. I can't wait to hit the streets with it, even though nobody's gonna see me.
Right. Well, it is very cute. And I feel like their Piff t-shirts and sweatshirts just get better every season.
Yes, definitely. Here.
Yes, it's even cuter than the last one. So I'm here for the style. My hot topic is a little bit different. I am going to talk about cannabis. Yes. So I am currently smoking on the New York Rico, powered by some super silver cheese crumbles. So I am feeling real cannabis friendly right now. I'm all about supporting your local growers and smoking some organic good. So I'm going into the holiday season right. You know how I like to be on holiday.
Yes, okay. So you wait till I leave, and then we start talking about New York Rico and super silver cheese. What? Okay. Excuse me. And how are you consuming this? What you got? Any new toys?
I do have some new toys. I'm going to bring on She Blaze for my high of the week. It's still very cute. I'm getting used to it. I also just want to make sure I'm using it correct because I love using the concentrate pens. And so I do that and it's crumble. So when I'm rolling a joint, put it in there just a little bit and it just keeps you high all day. And New York Rico is a great hybrid because it doesn't make you too tired, but it doesn't give you the super head high paranoia. And so I get all my work done, but also I'm feeling super relaxed in between traffic. So I am feeling really great right now, you guys.
That's awesome. Well, I definitely can't wait to try it because I love a relaxed work day. Well,
I know. Every day is a work day for you, Miss Dasheeda Dawson.
And now about them hot topics, please. Thank you.
Okay, because New York Rico is going to help me read some people because we are going to have a great read on today's episode of She Blaze. And our first hot topic really is all the way in Washington State. They have such a lack of diversity within their cannabis industry. I don't want to laugh, but I am going to give them a little bit of a side eye because recently they had an announcement basically saying Sean Kemp was the first Black owner of a retail marijuana store in Seattle, which was opened on October 30th. Now, we really got to talk about it because this shows the lack of diversity they truly have, that this is, out of all these years, the first Black, honestly. And then secondly, their officials had to go back and make them retract the statement saying, hey, he actually joined onto an already established cannabis license. So he is not the first Black, and he did not go through whatever social equity program they really not doing a good job at, since there ain't no first Black none.
Wow. Whew. Well, you know what? Okay, so we got a lot of issues that are like all wrapped up into this issue, right? First of all, the lack of diversity is real. We are still getting to first, but that is not just cannabis. I mean, it's across the board. Just this past year, we had the first Black valedictorian from Princeton University, which is a school that's been around for over 200 years. Okay, so we just showing some of the challenges we have as just Black and brown people in this country, and the industry is no different. And in some cases, because the industry, of course, like Washington, when it legalized, it basically said if you had any prior cannabis involvement in a negative way, you couldn't be in the industry, which obviously was disproportionately Black and brown folks. It was a barrier, but the money also is a barrier. Their industry, oh my God, it has struggled. They have extremely high taxes. It is a really basically defunct medical market that's how it started. And they really still haven't seen, I would say, the equity. There are bills and there are programs, but Shawn Kemp is not one of them. And that brings me to the second issue, which is we have a lot of people who are jumping into this industry, utilizing their fame, Black people especially, and you're not doing enough of a Google search to make sure that if you're going to make the claim of the first, that it actually is real. We've seen that happen time and time again. And it in some ways shows a disrespect to the real pioneers. Folks been doing this 10 plus years. I always say we're not even real OGs. We're the young OGs, right? Whereas maybe starting to change the language, things that we have just started to hear. I mean, I know 10 years ago, they wasn't calling it a legacy market. That's new, right? They wasn't calling it cannabis as prevalent as it is. That's new. And those are the type of things that we've been able to do. But when you hear people co-opting your language and their, presentations without giving you credit for it, it's like shameful. But it's okay. I'm petty enough to post something from 2017 where I said exactly the same thing. And then when you deliver it a certain way, oftentimes it becomes memorable the way the original person delivered it. So, I've had this happen too often. And I think it's just sad. It really is. We've got to come in with a better story than just being the first. What are you going to be actually doing in the industry rather than co-opting concepts? Are you actually going to be doing them and implementing them and actually seeing some sort of results? If you're not here to work, you're going to get called out in 2021.
Well, yes, you are right. And we are not letting anything slide. Well, ultimately, Washington state officials did have to say that Shawn Kemp is the first person to actually identify as a Black or African American retail owner. So it's a real tricky situation when we start getting into equity. They're finally starting equity programs. And so being able to be the first is really challenging. But I think you're right. At the end of the day, they are majority white ownership either way, even though he is the first. It's not like it's a conglomerate of him and other Black first. And so it's just not really as telling. Ultimately, they, of course, apologized and said that they want to create an incubator for people of color and women. But my problem is read the room, okay? Read the room. What is going on here? You need to go into the African American community within Washington state and really develop some rapport with the community, because you're not reading the room, sir.
No, but also, Washington State is where an old girl is from, and now her name is slipping me, but where she became head of the Seattle NAACP, and she was a really white woman posing as a Black woman, right?
Yeah.
So they struggle with even identifying diversity. Like they couldn't see it even if it was standing in their face. But obviously there's Black people in Washington. And what we need to do is, you do have to engage. I know that same struggle in Oregon. There are Black people there as well. And even if they are a small minority, they've still been oppressed, and they've definitely gotten the disproportionate brunt of what has happened with cannabis prohibition. And it's on the state to fix that. Thank you. I was like, what's her name? Her name is Rachel Dolezal. I was like, I don't know this lady name like that, but
Omar.
Yeah, I'm like, we do know her, but listen, it is what it is. She was able to pass there. Let's be real, it wouldn't happen in Brooklyn, right? The sniff test would have been a little bit shorter, but what it is a signal to me that they're not necessarily looking for authenticity in their diversity, right? That's all I'm saying. And so this Sean Kemp thing is again an example of where we take someone who has their own fame and his experience as an NBA professional player and what he's done for that city, Seattle, absolutely important. But let's be real, he's not breaking down barriers in cannabis, period.
I know that's right. And you did read the room, ma'am. And thank you guys for joining us on today's episode. We are getting into some real juicy topics as we are questioning New Jersey's lawmakers on our main topic. So thank you for tuning in and stay joined because we're getting into our hot topic number 2. And it's really, we're going to show some light on some NBA. You know, they are ending THC testing for 2021 and 22 season, and this is nothing new though. And it's like, okay, what are y'all giving us now? So basically they decided not to randomly drug test players for marijuana, but this happened at the beginning of the COVID bubble. Like they decided, so why wouldn't they just make it permanent? Like, what is going on with this?
Well, I mean, I understand how businesses work, and they're trying to dip their foot in the toe in the water, right? They're not trying to really pick a side, and but at the same time that doesn't help either. I think you're right. Like, I'm a little frustrated here because the NBA could be doing a lot more. You have a platform, and if you're going to remove THC from the testing, then let's stand behind the platform. Let's leverage your resources to get some of the best cannabinoid doctors in there. They exist. We happen to be working with a family of them that can come and really advise as you get NBA players prepared in the off season. And yes, while you may just assume that you're giving them a pass as they go recreate with cannabis, it's still medicine first and always. And so I think it's just so important for us to force and push the entities that have the money and the capability to, put more research behind it, figure out how they're utilizing it, and put these guys on a regimen. And there's an off-season regimen and there's an on-season regimen. And the fact of the matter is, I think that would be more educational to them than to piecemeal this like access, so to speak, right? Limited time access, and you're using COVID as the excuse. Everybody's got PTSD, factual, right? And absolutely, cannabis is helping with that, true. But let's be real, the anti-inflammation. I mean, I think about all the time that if I was using cannabis in some way while I was in high school, I maybe wouldn't have developed arthritis by the time I was 19. These guys have bodies that are literally on fire underneath the level of the skin all the time. And they're doing what I was doing, using Advils and Aleve and ibuprofen.
They probably using something so much stronger than that, honestly. Like, and they're probably test dummies and guinea pigs for some of the stuff we can't even get right now.
You're probably right, especially some of the more premier ones. Like I personally, like I say, I would bet my left arm that definitely LeBron is using and doing some sort of cannabinoid treatment. I mean, he's literally a superhero, and his recovery is like so awesome. I believe he's doing it. And again, rich people have that privilege, right? Rich people have access and privilege. And in some ways, I feel like this is the business of NBA, again, dipping their toe in the water on cannabis and saying, hey, we don't want to get our stars in trouble because they're accessing what science we have available to us, but we also don't want to lose our sponsors or any advertisement or any of the like. But that just means they need better marketing people and they need better strategists. And I'm not raising my hand for that job, although I think I could do it in my sleep at this point. You need to find the right people who are already within the brand space, already spending lots of money in cannabis, and it's there. And just the NBA has to decide to take that investment. And it's not an investment in cannabis; it's an investment in your players, because I think it will instill some longevity for their bodies for sure.
No, I absolutely agree. And there's so many cool things that they could do, even if they just try to use it as a medicinal benefit. You know, if you don't want it to be marketing and branding, fine. take that off permanently. And then if you're looking at it from a medicinal standpoint, that's not something you got to run a campaign about.
Right.
Okay. And that's real. And so, again, NBA, we side eyeing y'all. Read the room. Okay. All these former NBA superstars are not getting into cannabis because it is the next money making thing, because you don't make money immediately for a lot of these things, especially if you're touching the plant. Now, if you ancillary, there's some way around. But if you're touching the plant, no, boo.
Right.
You're not making no income.
Not like that. For a lot of them, they've been consuming, right? They've been using, and they've seen the relief of it. Cliff Robinson, R.I.P. Cliff Robinson, who just passed earlier this year, he was absolutely one of the first people, to really come out and be like, listen, this is what I was doing. He even talks about some of his experiences in the city of Portland being targeted by police officers. I mean, the mayor actually had to apologize to him because of how he was treated several times. So yeah, it's all wrapped in. They're bearing the brunt on the social justice side, law enforcement side, as Black and brown men, but they're also bearing the brunt as athletes who are really going hard on their body from young age, and not really having the appropriate, I think, medicine for them to really recover and get back out on the court.
No, I completely agree. And since we're talking about different medicinal ways they could really benefit as consumers, we got to get into our hot topic number 3, because ultimately, research has been so stingy because the FDA has had it in handcuffs. Now, we've talked about it previously on different seasons of She Blaze, where the FDA giving people to run around. So now they got to sue them. They're going back and creating fake guidelines, never actually solidifying nothing. So I guess, the people that's lobbying really put their foot on the House of Representatives' necks, honey, because ultimately there was recently a bill for medical marijuana research act on the floor, and it passed.
So that's what you mean by secretly, because who knew about this, right? Like, who was paying attention about this? We have been talking about it for a while, and there's a lot of backdoor stuff that's happening. I mean, MORE Act again passed just last week. It was definitely not what we expected. This is another bill that's passed, except it's not a lot of, flair behind it, right? Not a lot of press behind it. It's sort of one of those things where it's only for some people, and we happen to be science people, and so of course we're following what's happening there. Oregon has been, part of my job working with the governor's frameworking subcommittee for the Oregon Cannabis Commission has been trying to figure out some of this medical research opportunity around cannabis. But I also think at the end of the day, this is big pharma also that's come knocking at the door and seeing that there is an opportunity for them to get in the game, and they get in the game usually through the way of research first, right. and really then determining whether or not they can move forward from there. If you can only get bad weed from University of Mississippi and only limited, right, in terms of how you can participate, that's not really the way they do things. They like to be autonomous. They have their own protocols and SOPs, standard operating practices, and they definitely know how to make drugs, right? They know how to make drugs in mass. And so I definitely see this as just another big industry move that is seeming like it's good for the patient, and maybe there will be, but if we don't show up and ask for what we need to be in these type of bills and stop letting them happen sort of quietly, it's not going to be what we need.
Well, maybe they was nervous because you read them the real riot ad on the MORE Act last week. You read them to tears, honey. They don't even know. They thought they was doing something, and they ain't do nothing, as you said. Okay,
no, it actually went back, so it's like
right. So they probably got nervous and was like, "Well, let's just put this. We don't got to have a lot of press on this one." And so
we they did not anyway. Thanks to Ice, who is always looking, sniffing it out.
Okay, we will, and we are sniffing it out because they, in this act, they put that they wanted the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Attorney General to require a process for medical marijuana manufacturers and distributors during to supply research for cannabis. Now, this will be They will have 60 days to work on the framework, but it will have a year to have them actually create the process.
Wow. Well, the good news is that this is just the House. The good news is that it probably won't pass the Senate or won't be looked at this year or this session. And we have some time between now and next session to really make it look like one that's equity centered and a policy that's meant for research, really for patients. And I mean all patients.
Yes. And no, actually, they are not giving guidelines on the states being able to grow your own cannabis. Again, that is ruled by the state. This is just giving them federal access to clinical research and having more manufacturing and processing applicants and access versus what they currently have with the FDA in the whatever contract they have in Mississippi. So their process is not working right now, and they want to bypass the FDA. And by doing this, they are putting it on the Attorney General and the Department of Health and Human Services to create a framework for applicants to do manufacturing.
I mean, it's a money-making opportunity for people who are already in the cannabis space, multi-state operators. And so if you're already an operator and you have ability to just say, okay, this part of the business is just going to be for the federal medical. Also, we know that federal medical licensing is probably going to get you grandfathered into any federal adult use license bill, as well. It is one of those things, again, that we usually don't know, and we're not at the table when these discussions are happening. And so I'm glad we're calling it out on the show, because that means that there's an opportunity if you are, considering, and even if you're in hemp and you're doing anything that is seed to solution, you could also apply that skill set to supporting medical research for the government.
Absolutely. And ultimately, they are not giving any caps on these licenses or applicants. They want as many people in this clinical research as possible, it seems like, or as many businesses as possible. However, they do have some things written where it's like saying, if you do not get the application, you're denied, the Attorney General has to explain to you why you were denied. And some of the reasons you could automatically be denied is past convictions on a federal and state level, basically not being a good public figure. And again, if you do not have a business process plan or experience with clinical research, you can automatically be denied, clinical or cannabis.
Okay. See, these are the equity opportunities that we are still struggling for, right? It isn't equity centered. The felony exclusion continues to be an issue at the federal level that they want to walk back all the work that we've been doing. One, these entities should absolutely be able to, participate in equity programs at their state and local levels, which often will mean employing people who have previous felonies as it pertains to cannabis. And does that make them not qualified based on the entity requirements often that you see in federal bills? I'm also a little bit disheartened by, again, this idea that if you don't have clinical research, and I guess cannabis research, I'm glad is there, but we know there's been limits, right? Yeah. It's federally illegal. What unicorn exists in the United States that has federally legal clinical research in cannabis?
Right.
University of Mississippi, that's cool. No. I mean, it's like, the fact of the matter is that we really aren't, again, making laws that make sense, for where we are. You absolutely need to pull from the people who have established seed to solution operations, or even certain portions of it, because you can certainly just be manufacturing oils, right? And maybe that's all that you are an expert on. But allow people who already have been in the industry and really building the cannabis industry, fighting at a local and state level for medical research, allow them to take part in the process. They absolutely need to be talking to Doctors for Cannabis Regulation. I have to get a plug to the organization that I'm on the board for. And, again, I'm excited for the work that I've been doing in Oregon, because I think it will set precedent for how the federal government needs to do this. But it's just insane that we're still seeing the same mistakes over and over again.
I mean, it is. I feel like it is always an attack whenever they say prior convictions, because we know we have such a messed up justice system that we have to go back and correct. Stop writing this into the damn law. Like, just leave it out. It doesn't have to be. Just say that they have to tell you why they're denying you. And keep it short, keep it cute. Like, don't make it because you have a felony or because you have prior convictions to be denied. I just feel like that is, again, a low blow hit under the belt, always saying you're doing stuff for us, but really stabbing us in the back.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a reality. They're definitely not really having the right people in the room, and we'll be in the room more and more, because I think the vocal part of the industry has certainly clapped back a few different times around what we're seeing. I think that's why I'm excited to be part of Cannabis Regulators of Color Coalition, because we are sort of a catcher's mitt, and we're doing it. We're actually creating the policies, we're implementing them and executing them, and going back and fixing some of the messed up things that are in place. We have that experience, and so we're going to keep it real, but at the same time very equity centered. We know that there are some things sound good, even equity good, right? But then when you try to go and implement it, because of bureaucracy, slowness, inefficiencies in the government, can take forever. Don't get me started on how long it takes the government to get money out the door. And so every time we say another agency or these programs, all we're talking about is years before we start to really see the results happen on the constituent side.
Oh, you are speaking facts, because we are seeing that right now with COVID. Yep. People are up in arms about what's going on with the CARES Act and it expiring and what they're going to do about it. And they're, again, Mitch McConnell, he is running his whole show. So luckily the this is just the House of Representatives. This is not the Senate. And we know it's not going nowhere on the Senate, because they can't even agree about COVID.
Right. Yes, and they definitely not agreeing about cannabis. Let's be real. But let's be also real. Other countries are doing COVID-related clinical studies using cannabis, high amounts of CBD being leveraged in the late stages of COVID to reduce extreme inflammation when the body starts to attack itself. And it starts to really kill the organs in your body. It's a cytokine storm, and basically the properties of CBD absolutely support at high doses. And these are the things that we're seeing out of Canada, out of Israel. I mean, people forget the whole world had COVID, but the whole world is not strangling cannabis, or, like you said, have it up in handcuffs like the FDA.
Nope. And we are going to call you out every single time, because y'all claim we first world, so we need some more first world rights. And with that, we are going to go to the main topic, which really we love doing this, but we about to read some lawmakers, okay, especially in New Jersey, because New Jersey fought for legalization when they voted yes on question 1. And now y'all are always trying to strangle the cannabis plant, and they trying us, sis.
They are, New Jersey is like one of those things where it's like, God, you celebrate it, and people were celebrating. But there were also some people, like New Jersey Weed Man from the door was just like, don't trust these government folk. And, I don't know, I might have to say it. He might have been right. The government is always got another motive, and it isn't what we expect it to be from face value. And I'm not ashamed to call it out, because that's not what the government is for. It belongs to the people, and the expectation is that for the people, there's supposed to be legislation that is put in place that is equity centered, which basically doesn't mean, oh, it just that's for the Black and brown folks. That's a lot of the story too. Equity centered means that we're going to make sure that everybody has access, and the people who have various disabilities in many different ways, economic disabilities, physical disabilities, we've got to figure out how our resources and our money, if you will, gets accessible to all of these people. And we also have to start admitting that there were many mistakes made, and doubling down, tripling down on some of those mistakes as recent as last year. And so New Jersey has a lot at stake to fix this. It's not going to work if it's just performative. And so much of this is performative. I just want to give people standing ovation for the acting job that they're doing. It's ridiculous.
They are. And, we are going to ask our watchers and followers, do you think New Jersey lawmakers are confused about legalization? And after you hear this main topic, let us know, because we agreeing that they confused, but we got to hear from the people. I like to be the voice of the people, and I like to be on the money. So let me know if they're and ultimately, this is why we think they're confused. So they are basically saying that they have a deal, they made it, they struck it, and we've been following S21, A21 from the start of its announcement. And again, we've seen a similar bill like this on their last session, so they just gave it a new name, a new number, and put it right back on the docket. Mm-hmm. And so we've been with them every step of the way. And basically, they are proposing a cap on licenses. They're saying that there will only be 37 licenses to grow for the first 2 years of legal sales, and they will not limit micro licenses. However, micro licenses are businesses that have less than 10 employees.
Yeah. There's a lot that you kind of, we got to bring people just a little bit up to speed. And I'll just say this. We have been following from the beginning. The initial bill that was proposed, it was basically last year's bill with a different wig, right? We called that out. We testified, and essentially they came back with some amendments. The second time we testified, but really didn't receive the amendments until day of in that assembly meeting. The amendments were in the right direction. So I will give them some props that they're moving the needle slowly. Essentially, we were loud enough from the beginning that I definitely feel like it put a halt on what they thought was going to be an easy breezy way to automatic pass. And again, if we didn't have the right people on the ground, and again, shout out to Jessica Gonzalez and Leo Bridgewater, if we didn't have the right people who were like waving the flag and basically saying, yo, this is about to go down and it's really jacked up, people wouldn't know. And I think that's partly why I appreciate our platform, is we're just constantly trying to amplify what is messed up about what's happening within New Jersey. So that was the first F up, if you will. They're trying to rectify it, and they're working with people within the Black and brown community. I'll give them that. But they have largely been people who are historically in support of social justice, but they wrap around the story around cannabis justice. It's like social justice, but we don't know nothing about what that cannabis is. And that is part of the problem. When you talk to people who are part of NAACP, these historic organizations where, we were the first at the conference, we were one of the first to speak about it, where you do not have people who are cannabis competent in any way, shape, or form, science, business, or policy, deciding they're going to be the advisors on it. And they're looking for what they think sounds like a good number, but when you don't realize how big the actual industry is and how big that number is, you sell your crew off for peanuts, if you will. And that's what's been happening. And I don't have a problem calling it out. Now, I'll work with any person, any Black legislator, any Black and brown legislator, any white legislator. If you want real equity, that's really what we're calling for. And we have to stop performing like it's pretend equity is like, okay. We actually have to do it. And some of the work they've done is to try to get to the same bill. So one of the last things I'll say is the Assembly had different amendments than the Senate. And basically they were going down their own processes. They both have to pass through their own processes, and then the governor has to sign it. And it has to be the same bill. If it's not the same bill, know, then that's a problem. So when you said they found the deal is between the Assembly lead and the Senate lead, who for the bill specifically. And finding the deal was this cap. And I don't know why they pressed about this 37 licenses to grow. Don't they realize that Oklahoma literally has 9,000 business licenses, and the number one license they give out are cultivation licenses? They got thousands of cultivation licenses.
You mean Toklahoma? Like, y'all bypass and that's their medical, right? Like, they bypass making a good medical market just to push adult use. And I think the biggest issue I have is, like, they're really rushing this process. Whether we could start from the beginning when they tried to do possession act, and they capped it, they mashed it in with mushrooms, but then mushrooms didn't do good, so they threw them back, and now they're trying to do this possession one. Like, y'all are confusing what the people voted for. Ultimately, whether there is an act in place or not, guess what, New Jersey residents? It is legal to have cannabis on you now. It is in the Constitution. Now, does that mean you're going to go out and sell it, buy it, or exchange it in any way? No. But you know that you can have the smell on you. You know you can have it in your home.
Well, I would say a cautionary tale, because what happens when you don't bring along law enforcement is that they're the last to know. New York has been decriminalized for over 40 years on the book, saying that cannabis possession is not a crime in the way that we are treated, right? And so I'm a little concerned in saying that, but yes, January 1st, starting January 1st, the Constitution changes. So technically in places like Hunterton, where a Black person is 14 times more likely to be arrested for cannabis possession as compared to a white person, I call them out every single time because they don't have no Black people there. And so what that means is if you happen to be Black, good luck, because you're going to get harassed, you're going to get picked up. And because more and more people are leveraging and using cannabis in all different types of ways, they probably got cannabis on them. And so that is what they're like grappling with. They don't have a reason right now to stop harassing and arresting people. But when January 1st happens, technically the Constitution says that they should stop. But again, without law enforcement being retrained, you
write an act for law enforcement. Write the act for law enforcement. Create a law for them.
Yes. On how they're supposed to behave. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Stop trying to create a law for us. Let us do what we're doing. Because guess what? We've been advocating and educating the community about cannabis since before y'all even could spell it. So stop it.
Well, I remember they wrote the question backwards anyway. So I am really more so concerned with our people who are, again, still in public housing and in places obviously where consumption, no matter what, is going to lead to an unwanted interaction with a state official or a county official. It could be Child Protective Services. It could be while you're in the hospital, the doctors, the medical association within New Jersey did not support cannabis legalization. So all the people that control things in our life are still not educated around cannabis. Meanwhile, they're trying to push into law a way to make money from it. It does put the cart before the horse. The medical program only has 12 license holders right now. And even though New Jersey is way better than New York, at least they got flower, right, and have an assortment, right, it's still limited cultivation. I mean, so much so that there's definitely been research done on just what's available in New Jersey. And people shocked to shit, excuse my language, when I tell them what I'm using on the West Coast for the ailments that I have and what percentage CBD versus THC is actually in the flower. They're like shocked. And I'm like, but it's genetics. And so if we actually could bring better genetics through more cultivation, we would basically, I would say, diversify the industry in such an amazing way. And let's be honest, they still haven't really made a declarative statement around home grow. Senator Nick Scutari actually was on the record essentially implying that, home grow, sometimes doesn't work because people don't grow just for themselves. Again, we're still leaning in on this thought that because you're consuming cannabis, then you are inherently bad and you must have some side hustle going on as it pertains to cannabis, as opposed to maybe, no, y'all don't grow what I need, and I'm going to grow what I need, what I know works for me, period.
Y'all be careful. All y'all people that have y'all regular gardens with your spinach, your lettuce, your potatoes, they are coming for y'all. They are going to cap your home garden, okay? They are not going to let you grow it because that is what they're doing with cannabis right now.
Well, and it's on both sides. You see people try to stomp out the flower and hemp because it looks so much like marijuana because they're part of the same genus. And the more that we kind of try to keep bifurcating between hemp and marijuana and then trifurcating medical and adult use and making it like it's more complicated than it needs to be when it all is just still one plant. Every single product iteration that you can think about comes from one plant still.
Right.
And all of these, I guess all of these extra layers we're adding to it, it is, to your point, we are chokeholding the plant and we're not really starting to get out of it the way we need. It's like a point of diminishing returns where you're doing too much. And I think governments are really doing too much, starting with not giving consumers enough of time without rules and regulation about selling and just let people be comfortable carrying it on them, right? Let people be comfortable even smelling like it, okay?
Right.
I mean, that sounds like so novel, but that's a fact of what is required if you want your adult use market to be better, period.
You are speaking straight up facts, but it seems like whether we like it or not, this thing is happening and it's being voted on next week. I mean, like, don't they have something else to do, like, right before the holidays other than vote on this bull? Like, y'all could be voting on more COVID relief, but instead,
in their mind, they think this is COVID relief, okay? That's the problem.
Not if you don't do it right.
Well, that's the problem also because they believe, I mean, again, the arrogance that you got to go back. All of these things are taped and you can hear how people are talking about just in that first assembly meeting where the chair of the assembly was calling this the most progressive bill in cannabis ever. Like, how wrong could he be? And he's never retracted it. He's gone on the record multiple times saying it. And you sound crazy, son, for real, because it's not even remotely progressive. It didn't even say the word equity, and they're still struggling with it. So it's like, again, the arrogance is what prevents them from seeing that the path that they're on is not COVID relief path, because the people will not flock to this market that you're creating. It's not if you build it, they will come. Maybe from New York and Pennsylvania, perhaps, but the New Jersey people who live there, no, they're not going to give up a comfortable legacy market, which, by the way, exists and exists very, very comfortably. So you can
and will continue to exist if you don't do it right.
To exist, exactly. And they don't want to acknowledge that that's a real market. All they think is, oh, those are sinister people, and they don't really know, how to do real business. You think they don't? You think they don't?
You underestimating them for sure.
And that would be foolish. And I just feel like that's part of the problem right now is the foolish politicians and legislators are the ones creating these bills. And you can see, you read it. And I'm sometimes, ashamed that we haven't been able to just, like you said, read the room, grab the right people, bring them to the table, and be superstars by coming to the table with something that's really doable. This is good enough is not the thing that we should be saying at the end of 2020 after all that we've seen. And that's what we've been told. And I feel like they're not ready for 2021, I guess, because we're at a point now where, no, I'm not. This is good enough is only said by somebody who has the privilege to either move to another state to get the medicine that they need or never had dealt with the worst parts of racially biased cannabis prohibition. And you need to STFU as a result.
Hello, and you are making some strong points. Again, next week this is happening. So if you are a New Jersey resident or some, tell a friend to tell a friend and go down and really at least lobby outside to show support, because there will be people who are really, really here for the cannabis industry testifying and really setting the record straight. So they would love your support outside. Follow Leo Bridgewater to learn more. And there are some key takeaways that everyone within the New Jersey market is really coming to understanding about.
Definitely within the Black Legislative Caucus, the Latino Legislative Caucus, and the advocacy groups, we're trying to make the message the same so we're all having the same chorus. But one thing I will say is these are levers that can be used in other markets too. So if you're not in New Jersey, just take note, because these are the things that you want to see in an equity bill. And then, of course, you got to take a deeper dive and figure out how it works within your jurisdiction. But these are high level what you want to see.
Right. And so the first one in New Jersey is really to establish a social equity excise tax in addition to cannabis equity fund from the total cannabis tax revenue. So let's talk about it and really digest it. What do you mean? What do we mean by equity fund from total tax revenue? What's
Well,
different from the excise tax?
I definitely think that everyone should understand that taxes are different depending on which part of the industry you're impacting. There's the total tax revenue, everything collected from retail sales, from the various excise taxes that are imposed on cannabis businesses. But an excise tax is a tax that's imposed on the business directly and not on the consumer, versus the sales tax, which is 6.25% in New Jersey, is what is on the consumer. And that's like generally whatever you buy. You buy a car, is going to be with that 6.25%. And that's part of just being your contribution into New Jersey's revenue. And so sales tax is going to be always growing, always on for the cannabis industry. Excise taxes are generally at a discretion, and they may be implemented. In fact, the wording in A21 S21 says it may be implemented, and it can change based on the market. So one day it might be 25 cents per ounce or whatever it is, and the next day it could be 10 cents per ounce. And so as a fund, as a place to pool money, it becomes more risky. And of course, it sounds good to say, well, it's going to be 100% for social equity, but 100% of zero is zero. Just to
It's nothing.
yeah, I'm just saying, real talk. Like they like to use certain language, so we feel real excited over it and we dwell on it. And I feel like a lot of the African American leaders, non-cannabis leaders, have really focused on the social equity excise fee because it sounds good and it sounds like, well, it's a carve out. Well, again, 100% of zero, meaning if it never gets implemented, guess what? It will not be a fund available. And if it isn't implemented until 2 years after the industry starts, or until after the Cannabis Regulators Commission says to do it, you get a delay on the fund. You know what's not delayed though? The minute that cannabis tax revenue starts coming in from sales, then you having a percentage of that is a percentage of something. And so it's just important for people to recognize that we're asking for these two things, but the social equity excise fee, real talk, in my book, that's what we call a BATNA, a best alternative to no agreement. That's what BATNA stands for. It means like that's the last of the last of the last that I would get, because it's a moving target and it doesn't give me a certain number that I can work with. Whereas total tax revenue does. We have projections already. We know that this is going to be a $1 to $2 billion adult use market, which is why they're trying to run so fast to get to. But at the end of the day, we've got to carve out what is for us. The last thing I'll say is there is this language that makes you believe it's for us, in that they're saying 70% of the total cannabis tax revenue is going to go to these type of social justice and reform programs. But the way it's doing it, and we talked a little bit earlier about the slow rigmarole it takes to get money out. Well, guess what? It's going to go from the state got to count it. It takes a little bit of its cut. 70% is then going to be doled out to the different municipalities, and then they determine what happens from there. I'm like, by the time just talking about it is a 2-year process to get the money out the door. And then every municipality may be different. Hunterdon may not think it needs to have any focus on social justice because they might not know they have a real issue with their 14 times racial disparity.
Absolutely. And the problem is that there's no real language really making it force it. So we want them to change it, and we want them to establish and enforce it.
Yes.
And so the second thing we're really asking for in New Jersey is to create a cannabis equity applicant status. Now, this is really when it gets tricky. You gotta learn, you gotta know your state, you gotta know how a lot of these state things take, how long it takes, and that's why you want them to ask for it up front to create that program in the language.
Absolutely. I mean, part of the challenge is all the language is so ambiguous. So even the money part is like to social justice and things is real cliche. And it bothers me. It's like what things? What exactly are we talking about?
You
And in
talking
this
about police?
case, yeah, mostly police, right? And in this
Right.
case, it's the equity applicant status. Like, who are you talking about? Who is actually going to be able to get prioritized licensing, micro licenses? The assumption that we can use these impact zones is just a wrong assumption. First of all, people move. Gentrification has played a toll on many hoods that were over policed and violated by this cannabis prohibition era. And, for people also to assume that you had to live in the hood to be terrorized. I mean, Huntington says it all. You might have made it to the suburbs, right? Like, I could have totally been in that suburb. And then it's like, oh, you picking up my 14-year-old son. Why?
Right.
Because he's Black. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that is the challenge, is like recognizing that Black, Indigenous, and Latinx folks have been basically targeted as a result, and they use marijuana as the way to really lead to further injustices. And so it's not just about where you lived, it's also about your race. And so they need to actually dictate the status, and there's a lot of precedent. Massachusetts definitely lists race as one of 10 things that you can qualify for, but Oregon, we have one of 3. Is like your race is one of those 3 priority areas, or prior conviction, arrest, incarceration as it pertains to cannabis, and you have under a certain median income as well, because we know that there's several people who have that, but they definitely are still making and living large because they come from family that does so. So we want to help the right people, but we can be more declarative, and we have enough precedent to do that.
I completely agree. And they have to at least qualify for one, and it needs to be an even amount of each pool too, And y'all got to write that in, because common sense is not common, especially in the government. And so our third fact is allocating a portion of the tax revenue towards the Office of Minority, Disabled, Veterans, and Women Cannabis Business Development. Now, when I was first reading the act, I know that it said that they had to first be MWBE and certified. So, I hope they change that, because Lord knows running through those hoops it takes some time. And if you only want to specifically target cannabis.
No, I first I hate this office name, and that's why I was giving the face when you were saying it. I'm like, I know to our listeners, you can't see my face, but the face says it all, which is like, who came up with this? And they should be fired. At the end of the day, first of all, Black and brown people are more and more becoming the majority. So this minority language is soon going to have to be trashed. Okay. And the other thing is that this is really a cannabis equity office. Like, call it what it is, meaning you're looking for an opportunity to create equity in total, but also maybe it's cannabis equity and business development. So that's another thing. Language does mean a lot, and your intentions behind how you name it. This does sound like MWBE, which, by the way, is something that isn't very accessible still to a lot of Black and brown folks, despite decades of it being around. And so when we give money to an office like this, it has to be intentional, and they have to have certain key performance indicators to say, like, are they doing a good job? Is the industry doing a good job? Is the government's framework doing a good job? These are the things that I feel are really important for this office, and they have to have a budget. It can't be, from the 30% that doesn't go to the municipalities, maybe they get a budget if the CRCC said, like, it's a mess. They're supposed to be the ones to manage this cannabis equity fund, period.
Absolutely. And yes, name matters, vocabulary matters. Y'all really need to make this make sense for the residents of New Jersey, the people that want to start business, move to New Jersey to even start business, because we know this is not a business you could just do anywhere either. So, like, y'all could do better. Another point that you guys really want to make in New Jersey is to remove or alter certain micro business restrictions. Now, when we were talking about licenses, the micro business restrictions are you have to have 10 or less employees. There's no clear path on how you go from a micro business to a real big business. And there's nothing written to law, so they will have to create framework based on whatever information they have with these micro businesses.
Yeah, I think people love creating a micro something. They're like, let them small businesses do a little something, something. But it doesn't really ever get any small business to a big business. And one of the things that people should know, the history of Walmart, the history of Target, is that these companies started as small businesses. FedEx, most of our Fortune 500 businesses that are US based started as small businesses. This is why I've been drinking this Piff tea, by the way, because my voice is just, I'm talking so much. I apologize.
Well, you've been reading them for the filth, honey, because they need to come correct.
Listen, and it's like me.
Right.
I gotta practice my read at this point because it's making me lose my voice. But no, we're stomping out the potential growth trajectory. When we hear about Amazon, which of course we think about it now, Gen Z, they don't know a small Amazon, but I remember Amazon was just where you was going online to get your books initially, and it was a small business. And so what we're missing is that a micro business can easily, if so desired by the owners, can grow. And if that is supposed to be an avenue that is access, like more accessible for Black and Brown communities, it's an equity access avenue, then we have to show them the path beyond the micro canopy and the micro levels. At the end of the day, just because I'm starting in a little house don't mean that I don't want a mansion by the end of it all. It also doesn't mean I do want a mansion. And so having that as just an option as opposed to a requirement and having the ability to revisit, they have no way at this point to really sell. And a lot of small businesses, eventually you make your money, you have your wealth event by selling to a large company. And that's essentially what's going to happen at some point. Like federally, it's going to legalize. You got these big ass companies that's going to come in and they're not going to want to do it from the ground up. Same way they were with the natural hair space. Unilever was like, you know what? We tried it with Dove. We really tried it. But let's go ahead and get Shea Moisture.
With the tea. Right. Right.
That's how it works. And it's just unfortunate that they don't see that. And they see this, oh, so much opportunity to get all these people in little houses. It reminds me of the Nehemiah houses in Brooklyn. It was like, okay, you're getting people ownership, but the houses are not upgraded. They don't necessarily have the best stuff in it. And then they had all these real predatory lending schemes. And so it put a lot of Black and brown folks in a situation where they couldn't even keep their low income home they were supposed to be able to have in order to upgrade to maybe the multi-million-dollar type of brownstone if they wanted to. It's important to note that that's the trajectory.
Right. And, again, history repeats itself. You can learn from history by just making sure you're paying attention. It is the same thing, just a different wig. Like, pay attention. We have 40 to 50 years of references with some of these acts, and y'all are still using language from them instead of abolishing it and starting again. At some point, you can't keep remixing broke shit. Like, I think you tell me that all the time. You like, it's broke. You can't find a new way to use it. Throw it away. It's time to really start throwing away some of these things. And the next thing I really want to trash is removing all the licensing caps. Who the hell thought that was a good idea?
This is, again, some white, male, dominant, capitalistic thinking. There's no reason to have the licensing caps. Initially, I want to say it probably was thinking, oh my God, well, we have to really limit how many people have this ability because mostly bad people are dealing with weed, and so let's just make sure that we cut through and really get the best of the best. And again, who's making it a competition? The way it works is either and Amber Center said this, is like either your flower is fire, either your product is fire or it's not. And that's part of what's been challenging is in the legal market, there is no real competition other than the money competition. How much money you got? That doesn't mean you got the the product. That doesn't mean you got the brand. That doesn't mean you have the equity investment. That doesn't mean you have the things that really are going to resonate within the communities that are actually buying. Meanwhile, in the legacy market, it does come down to, if I'm gonna risk my life coming out to see you, don't give me no whackness, right? That's a enough for me to feel like I'm going to risk my life for us to have a quick meet and greet. And so it becomes a thing where you could test a lot of different plugs. You could really test the market if once you're in it. And they don't allow that in the legal market. It's like, here are the 3 in Minnesota. That's why they're all 3 bankrupt. And y'all, guess what? Don't make nothing with flour either, which, by the way, takes away some of that diversity, when it's like everything got to be an oil vape. Okay.
Nobody even wants to do that for real. Like, what? And I don't understand, again, the capping of the licenses. Now, my daddy is from Jersey City, and I grew up there a lot of times. And let me tell you something about it. Every freaking block had a liquor store. They all sold the same shit, too. It was nothing different. It was you ain't getting no new top shelf, nothing. Okay, now this is gentrified, so it probably looks a lot different. So I'm talking about quite a few years ago. But ultimately, if you're capping licenses, so what? Y'all could put every liquor store on every block, but it's only like 5 could be in this whole city that is pretty big. Like, that's unnecessary, and it's going to cause unnecessary traffic as well.
Yes, and dry spots, it still promotes going to the legacy market. They already struggle with their only like 6 dispensaries in the whole state. Mofos got to drive 25 to 35, 45 minutes just to get to a dispensary. And why? Because I can wait 25, 45 minutes for the dude to get to my house, okay? And then I'm not whipping out my ID, and I don't have to have an exchange that's unusual and full of more misinformation. There are some dispensaries that got educated employees, and that's because they've hired people like Dr. Monica, who's a pharmacist and cannabis pharmacist, and I appreciate those dispensaries. But by and large, let's be real, that's not really where you should be getting your medical advice from necessarily. And and I do feel like the point is that we need variety. I should be able to have an option, not who had the most money. And that's what the caps do. They limit who can be in it, who can play. It also creates a very corrupt system where people are trying to buy licenses, especially within local jurisdictions. And we've seen how it transpires. The whole office of cannabis management winds up getting arrested, Nevada, and have over from the beginning. So to me, the no license caps is really a fear. It's about fear about the underground market, but also a fear of the fact that all of a sudden, if you have too much flour, your market's going to be bad. There's a shelf life to this too, and there really are no farming caps, right? Like that's part of the challenges. We don't think of it as the plant where it starts from and how long we actually can utilize and keep it in circulation.
We not you thinking of it of nothing at this point other than trying to do whatever they did in the 1930s. And so the last point we really want to make is to ensure that there are delivery licenses and they have the ability to have access to supply chain, maybe not as much as California where they can literally debo your whole product and slap their brand on it. But I do think there needs to be a real call out for delivery, especially since we are in COVID times. We know that if there were no delivery, Uber Eats, Instacarts, and things like that, we would not be able to survive in quarantine. It's not like they're letting the USPS drop off food and cleaning supplies. So...
Yeah, I think there's also a difference between distribution and delivery in the traditional supply chain. So just in the interest of shortness, I'll just say distribution is usually business to business. It's the Pepsi guy you see dropping off the bottles when he's heading into the bodega. That's a distribution business typically. And oftentimes the manufacturer is also going to provide distribution. The way the license structure is here, I believe you can combine those two licenses. However, they're trying to also avoid too many like Voltron vertical licenses, and so they might not allow stacking in that way. Versus delivery is if you decided you was going to order a hero sandwich from that bodega, and they sent out a guy on a bike to your house to give it to you. So it's going to be business to consumer, and so that's the part where we're used to actually and understand that the most. That person may or may not be the plug, and the bodega may be considered sort of the plug's establishment, but the person we interact with is often who we're talking about as a plug. And that person should possibly be able to have their own business if they wanted to, right? To say, hey, I'll do delivery service for you, you, and you because I have this network. So it needs to be something that they have some more power, because on the West Coast, it's been very predatory, where you either part of the retail establishment or the distribution and the manufacturer, and then they trying to like debo that delivery component too, or you're part of a few 1, 2, or 3 delivery app businesses, kind of like the DoorDashes, et cetera, Uber Eats of the world. But nobody's really had the license to just be like, nah, I'm just going to be independent contractor doing the delivery myself. They still missing that element, and they need that because that's how you make the plug legit.
Well, that's not like that, but delivery people can change their brand in California.
Yes.
So the business to consumer, they can alter their menu to really benefit their company and their names they want to brand things as, and it is okay in their law. But I do think that lawmakers are truly struggling with what legalization means, what it means to legalize cannabis legalization. And I believe personally that New Jersey lawmakers are very confused about cannabis legalization.
They are. And I think that hopefully these 6 things will help them become a little less confused, especially if we're all saying it. And I think sometimes the devil's in the details. So, of course, I'm going to be continuing to testify on behalf of CRCC and in support of these things because I know that they are equity centered and equity driving, but it also requires implementation that also has the same mindset. So if their CRC came in and had a different mindset, it could be all the way jacked up. So it doesn't just stop at good legislation, but it definitely starts there. And we don't want to have anything limited because they've started us with a bad foundation. And right now the foundation is a little janky.
My question is, why create a CRC if y'all gonna do their job for them? Like, if the commission feels like it needs to be a cap, then let them be the one to implement a cap. Don't implement the cap in the law.
Yeah, I think that that's again a control, the same that applies everywhere else. We don't know who the commission is going to be yet. So of course, let me handle it, legislator, to do it now in advance because I don't know who they're going to pick or who gets, the final pick for those seats. And I think that is unfortunate. That's political, right? That's like, basically trying to hold the political power and in some ways it's shortchanging themselves. So it's either like we're going to be saying we told you so, or they will, make the adjustments and we can hopefully see a thriving industry emerge out of the state of New Jersey.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a good episode. We've gone over just a little bit, but just to remind you guys, they are having their Senate committee hearing on December 14th, and then they're having the full vote on the December 17th. So instead of really planning holidays and COVID relief, they are trying to figure out how to create a marketplace for cannabis. So if you are a New Jersey resident or you know anybody in New Jersey, tell a friend that they definitely could use your support, your voice, and they need you there. And so, Dasheeda, let them know. We know we can find you there next week, but let them know where else they can find you this week.
Of course, you can always find me at theweedhead.com, me and our company, but also I'm at Dasheeda Dawson on Instagram as well as Twitter. And, I'll be talking, I'm sure, because it's hashtag I say what I want to say at this point.
I know that's right. And we will read y'all for filth because y'all need to get educated for y'all coming to us, okay? Because we did not ask for y'all to come for us. And so you can follow us at She Blaze on IG, Facebook. Make sure you like, subscribe, and follow. And you can listen to us anytime on SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, WeTube, just anywhere. So thank y'all and have a great week.
Have a great week. I see you soon. Bye.
Okay.